Welcome back. Let's talk renovation and interior styling now with our dynamic design duo here to answer your questions.
Renovating for Profit founder Cherie Barber and Auction Day host and interior designer James Treble. Who are you again?
Who are you?
Thanks for being here once again.
This is surreal, isn't it?
I almost got time to miss you and then here you are.
I fear I'm not going to get a word in
I feel
this
like
segment.
a little bit
I might
like
just sit
Charlie
back.
with the three angels here. It's nice to have this. Chris Kohler, you let him out for the day, running away.
You clearly don't know us very well. All right, let's jump into some viewer questions now. Cherie, you've had a question from Kimberly. She's written in saying that, like many homes from the same era, hers is from the 1960s and 70s, that utility rooms under the home, which aren't quite legal height, she wants to make the most of the space but still stay within the height requirements. How do you kind of cheat it? How do you make it so that every millimetre counts?
Well, there really is no way that you can cheat it. Like, the legal height is the legal height.
Yeah.
So it sounds great, but look, for most places it's 2.4 metres high from the underside of the ceiling. In Queensland, a lot of people lift their houses up, and that's typically about $40,000. So in this particular viewer's case, this is her room here. It's quite dark, so it's actually a decent head height. I think hers is right on 2.4. So this is one that I did probably about 5 years ago. Very similar, a utility room underneath, and I refreshed that whole room just for a couple of $100. So what I did is I made my spray gun my new best friend.
That cost only a couple $100?
Yeah, just a couple of $100. All I did was spray paint just the underside of the ceiling and the walls. So I used a lighter colour just to lighten it all up. Like in an underground subfloor space, you would never do a dark colour because it'd feel like a dungeon. So you can see I've just lightened it all up. And the beautiful thing with spray guns is that it does your whole room so quickly. Like, if you took to that with a paintbrush, that would take you 3 weeks. That took me about an hour to do the whole room on a spray gun. You need to do about 2 or 3 coats and get yourself a good spray gun. I love the Wagner spray guns because they don't chew up the paint. And what I did there is I just actually paving painted the floor. So
would a floor covering, of, you know, because that could take a couple of millimetres off the height that you have, and if you're measuring from those beams, does that reduce the amount of area that you've got?
It does. So that's the beautiful thing about paving paint. In a subfloor area, they quite often can have water issues as well. So you don't want to be installing timber flooring or anything like that because you're at risk of the timber flooring warping.
Correct.
So paving paint will normally do the trick. A couple of coats of that. You can see there, I just spray painted, I paving painted.
If you did want to add maybe something, you did an amazing job, and we know that you do that. And I love the fact that you've kept the height in the ceiling between those beams and just painted, because, you know, a layer of paint is a whatever of a millimetre. Rubber-backed floor carpet tiles are also another solution. They're really low profile, and because they're rubber, they're designed that you can lift them up if you get water in, because sometimes these areas underneath the homes have damp issues. Also, water can get in, so they're not going to add anything. They're probably going to add, 3 mil or something, and they're still able to be lifted up and moved, but they'll also maybe warm it up, because sometimes, depending on where you are around our beautiful country, it could be cool under there as well, so maybe that little bit of insulation. But I mean, a great transformation there, and the rug doesn't count in there, but it does add a lot of layering in your styling.
And I don't recommend seagrass matting, because when that gets wet, as it always does in those areas, it's disgusting.
So it can either be that rubber flooring or vinyl flooring, which is very popular. Again, it's just a couple of millimetres, very cheap, and all DIY. You could transform that subfloor area in a weekend, no problem.
So if there's someone in your family you don't like very much, you could just move them down there.
Lock them in the basement.
Why did you look at me when you said that?
Should we move on to our next question?
Okay, let's have another question.
Our next question is from Kylie. She is wondering if it's worth renovating a laundry. Is it worth spending much money on?
Well, I think it depends on the property value. If you've got a house that's a couple of $1 million or an apartment that's a high end, yes. Doing every room is valuable, but like for most Australians who've got a property under $750,000, I'm a big fan of not pouring too much money into a laundry, because there's typically one room that doesn't add a huge amount of value. You'll see in a second just some images of a laundry renovation that I did recently to one of my own personal properties last year. This was a laundry and a separate toilet on the back deck. You can see the laundry wasn't very usable.
Looking really blue.
So all I did here was I just installed a caboodle flat pack kitchen cabinetry, so I assembled that myself. If you can assemble IKEA, you can assemble caboodle, and I just went and bought a plain timber bench top from Bunnings. That was like $99 a panel. And I got my chippies to install it. So that was a reasonably low budget kitchen. That was appropriate for a $550,000 house. So I didn't spend a huge amount of money. I did keep the separate toilet, the toilet in the laundry.
Yeah.
That does add value.
Big
You can
time.
see it to the side there. So nothing crazy. It's not going to win any design awards. Doesn't need to. It's practical and it does add a bit of value. So don't go crazy in the laundry
Yeah.
would be my advice.
I think
I
sometimes...
have no intention of going crazy in my laundry.
if you've got a simple laundry, I think that you could actually add great, like geometric tiles in a splashback, something that's going to be unexpected, because the laundry is one of those rooms that people have gone to house when they're going to buy, and when they come to yours and the laundry has had care taken with it, so it's styled. Maybe you've got a hamper basket. I use this a lot with display homes when I style them. Instead of a washing machine, I've got a big basket in its place. So it's representing something and giving the laundry feel without having to have everything there, so, you know, totalitarian, utilitarian.
So this is really a bit random, but do a lot of people have integrated laundries these days in smaller, cheaper places? That,
Yeah,
you know, already
European bifolds.
Correct.
Yeah, absolutely. Like they've been a hot trend for ages, and it's just purely because we're running out of space these days. We need a junk room in our house.
Yep.
So yes, they're very, very popular.
Got to store all those chemicals that we shouldn't be using.
Yeah,
that
you just
people
got to
like
make sure you
handle.
do them right, waterproofing wise, particularly if on the upper level.
Yeah. Styling, I think, is important too. You can style things. You know, sometimes a glass jar filled with pegs and an old soap container, things that look a bit quirky.
Yeah.
I mean, Howard Storage even has like a soap and peg bucket. Things like that are really effective to get those key words in there and just make the laundry look a bit elevated and fun and really important to still address the room, but like you said, Sheree, not going overboard.
That's right. So you don't have to spend a huge amount of money on the hard structure. You can just trick it up with the accessories, exactly as James said.
Fancy that. James being right again.
Doesn't happen often, but it happens on this show.
All right, we're about to shut the front door. James, what does your front door say about you?
Well, do you know what? I've had people ask during the week about front doors because it's a big decision. So I just wanted to pull up some images to give you ideas at home. If you're renovating, you need to be aware of the size of the space you have already. And these are images. So this is actually from San Fran when I was walking through, but it's great because this is also inner city around the country. Using colour. Here, a gloss black or a gloss white, you can't go wrong. And I want to point out also those side lights, which is really important. Now this home, it's got a nice timber door in the middle with two side lights on the side, so that's a wide opening, and you could have two doors there, but that also lets light in. What I'm a big fan of is this one. It's got a nice wide 1200 wide door with the light in the door, but it's translucent to let it through. Now this home, I actually won awards for this home because it's quite stunning, but the timber door I put in matched with the timber work I put on top. So when you're thinking what to do, look at what's on the home to pick up your finishes and consider how important the door is from the inside. You can see this image and the next one's about to pop up. The light coming through there is so important because people who have solid doors, those rooms can be dark and no one wants a dark entry for you. You know, you want to have that natural light flooding through. This is pretty special, but with architecturally, you've got to have the right door for the right type of dwelling. So this is quite high end. This is another beautiful home in Australia that's got this beautiful timber panelling, and you go from a door into a door, and doors can cost a lot. These doors here, I use this on a home. These double doors, they're from a company called Axolotl. They're metal clad and they look like snakeskin, and they were $16,000 for those two front doors. So basically, just to repeat quickly, colour's great, but make sure it appropriately matches the house type you've got. If you've got to have the width of the cavity when you're renovating, which Sheree and I love to do, and she just lives doing it day and night, you be aware of the opening, because usually making it wider with a beam above is going to cost you money. And always pay attention to natural light. Natural light and airflow for me are so paramount just for longevity and making the house feel good when you move in. And so if you can get I would always prefer one wider door with a side light than two doors, because two doors are only 820 wide, and you know, I can't fit through it, whereas a big generous wide opening has a massive effect when you're walking through the home.
And it's a good little weekend reno project, isn't it? It can really transform the front of your house.
Yeah, and the good thing is your front door, like everybody's crazy about. Suddenly it seems to me like over the last 2 or 3 years, everybody's getting really adventurous with colour. And the good thing is your front door is such a small visual mass. It's only less than 2 square metres. And the good thing is, so experiment with colour. If you stuff it up, just go buy a new colour. It's easy.
And if you're in mass housing, if you're in terrace housing, it's fun to have a coloured front door. And you know, if you go out with your co-host on a weekend and you have a few wines, you come home. If you've got the right colour for your front door, you know which house is yours. I'm just leaving that as a really valuable point.
Yeah, because that may have happened to me.
Are big, heavy, sort of wide doors becoming more in vogue? Like, are they really quite popular right now? I feel like there's a lot of them
They're
popping
in
up.
vogue, and you can have a different style. So one large door can be hung from the side, so a hung door.
Yeah.
But a lot of wide doors, those 1200 wides, especially when I do 2400 high, so 2.4, so they're big, are pivot doors. So instead of pivoting from the side, they pivot from the side like this. So they end up opening to about 1100 wide because
Right.
the hinges are set in to the
Right.
door, and that's why it's called a pivot door, and that helps cope with the weight of a very heavy door.
Yeah.
And are we glad to see the back of those screen doors that were, you know, those really high security ones that were very unfriendly?
I always take them off,
I
but
do
what I
too.
do is if I'm selling or rent a property, I will take them off. I'll put them in the garage shed or the garage or the garden shed, and I'll either say to the buyer or the tenant, do you want it back on? Because most doors are beautiful behind the ugly security doors. So they're very practical, but you've got to decide practicality or looks.
Yeah.
How much security do you need?
Is
Depends
that
where you
ever a
live.
decision?
What you decide whether you have that
If it's that
security
each
or
dog
thing,
behind
you
the
know.
door. You're right.
Yeah.
As always, such great help and advice there from James Treble and Cherie Barber. Thanks for being on the show. Great to see you both.
Thanks, girls.